Hi, this is Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book initiative that began right when the pandemic did, when bookstore doors, that's difficult to say, were shuttered, and people's tours were canceled, including my own, and readers just couldn't connect with the writers they loved. So I like to say that we're no longer a baby. I think this is A Mighty Blaze's fifth year, maybe sixth. A few housekeeping things before we talk about our incredible guest, who I love. On the right, you'll see the chat. In the chat, I've listed a link so you can buy Nancy Johnson's People of Means, which is what we're talking about today, which is a fabulous, importantly profound book, and all other stuff. Oh, Anissa Joy Armstrong is here. Thank you for being here, Anissa. And also, if you have questions for Nancy, just pop them in the chat. Do not be shy. Or if you have comments, pop them in the chat, and we will just love it. So let me introduce Nancy. I'm so happy to have Nancy here because not only is she a remarkable writer, but she's my friend. And to me, that makes reading her all the more wonderful. I just love her work, and I just love her. She's a native of Chicago's South Side. She worked for more than a decade as an Emmy-nominated, award-winning TV journalist at CBS and ABC affiliates nationwide. A graduate of Northwestern University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, she lives in downtown Chicago and manages brand communications for a large nonprofit. Her first book, The Kindest Lie, which was so amazing, I literally read that book twice just to see how you did it, Nancy, was a Book of the Month Club selection and a Target Book Club pick. People of Means is a different book. And it's amazing. It's about two women and two different time periods. It's about racism and class and women and how we can impact the times we live in and the times to come. In 1959, we have Frida Gilroy. She's in Nashville. She comes from a middle American class lifestyle where Black and white live together. In Chicago, she encounters racism. No, in Chicago, she didn't encounter racism. She encounters it when she goes to the South, which horrifies her, as it would anyone, and it draws her into the civil rights movement. Frida's torn between her old world and her new world, between two people she loves. Meanwhile, in 1992 Chicago, set against the Rodney King trial, Frida's daughter, Tula, is juggling ambition and politics. Speaking out could cost her job, but staying silent could be a misstep with terrible consequences. This sounds so prescient and so familiar to what's going on now. We're going to talk about that. So let me just tell you some of the raves for this book. Johnson doesn't shy away from the complex and conflicting emotions and consequences that both characters face as they decide to take a stand. And in this way, she speaks for all of those who have ever faced a decision about how far to go in the name of what's right. People of Means is a timely look at who we are as a nation and who we can become if only we have the courage to follow our hearts. Kristen Harmel, best-selling author of The Paris Daughter. From Teresa Ann Fowler, New York Times bestseller author of A Good Neighborhood and Zelda, Nancy Johnson's poignant story of mother and daughter who in their youth are reluctantly pulled into the struggle for equal rights and equitable justice as hard but necessary questions about whether and how each of us should take action to right the wrongs. People of Means brings a compassionate, fresh, nuanced, and important perspective to fiction that centers the Black American experience. Book clubs will embrace this worthy tale. And finally, from Jean Kwok, Today's Show, Read with Jenna author and New York Times bestselling author, Nancy Johnson's People of Means spins a compelling narrative that explores the courage of a Black mother and daughter as they navigate the tumultuous waters of societal change. Beautifully written, propulsive, and poignant, this novel is a meditation on love and resilience. I loved this gorgeous book. So do I. So welcome to A Mighty Blaze, Nancy.
Thank you.
We're totally. Oh, you have questions already from Anissa. Okay, Anissa, I'm going to get you as soon as I ask Nancy some questions. I will get to your question for her. But thank you for those questions.
Yay, I love Anissa.
I love. We all love Anissa.
Yeah,
She's like the patron saint of all writers and
she is.
readers.
Yeah, she's a super reader and
Okay,
advocate for books.
so I always hate the question that everybody asks, which is, where do you get your idea? So I think a better question is, what was obsessing you to write this particular book? What was the question that you wanted to explore? And did writing this novel give you the answer you expected?
That's a really good question.
I always ask that question. I always want to know the answer.
Yeah. So I was really trying to explore this idea of resistance and
Mhm.
why people resist, and the ways that we do it and what draws people into it. And what I was inspired by, first of all, was the summer of 2020 when George Floyd was murdered. And you had so many people from every walk
Right,
of life and
right,
around the world getting involved in activism. Now, we saw some of the companies that were doing that and doing the DEI work ended up being performative. But I think a lot of the individuals who were engaging in this work were doing it for the right reasons. And they were just so outraged after watching this police officer, with his knee on the neck of this
I
black man
know.
for 9 minutes.
Disgusting.
Yeah, it was disgusting. And also we had the video and people saw that,
Right,
cell phone video, which kind of connects to when you think about the Rodney King case.
right.
That was one of the first instances of video, camcorder, grainy video, but video nonetheless. So anyway, that happened the summer of 2020. And a few months later, Representative John Lewis died. And I think of him as, or thought of him as just this civil
Right.
rights icon, right? Who was involved in all of this important, meaningful work. But then I watched a documentary on his life and he talked about being a student, being 19 years old and leading sit-ins on the college campus. He also went to Fisk University where my book is set. And I kept thinking, what must that be like, to be a young person? You're only 19. I think about what I was like at 19 and you're
Right.
trying to figure yourself out your first time away from home on a college campus. You're, taking classes and making friends and dating and all that. How do you engage in something larger than yourself
That's right.
can change the world? And so those were the things that I was the burning questions that I had. And I think what I took away from it, I mean, I always still have more questions, but I think everybody resists in their own way, because in this book you meet people who have very different ideas
That's
about
right.
what resistance looks like. And I think there are ways that we can do it in large and small ways. And no one's right or wrong necessarily. It's the choice you make about how you're going to engage in activism.
That's great. And I think that really speaks volumes to everything that's going on today. Any small thing can make a difference. You don't have to do the things that overwhelm you or you're just not capable of doing for some reason or another. And I think that's really, really important. I also wanted to say that because you mentioned videos and how that changed so much about fighting for what's right. Unfortunately, what do you think now about AI? Because sometimes it's very hard to tell what has been doctored and what hasn't.
Yeah, I do think that's, yeah. I don't know if we've seen that yet with any of these like police involved shootings yet.
Right,
But I
right.
think, yeah, but we might end up seeing those kinds of things. And
That's
so
right.
sometimes we do get fooled. And so we have to be more vigilant than ever because of AI. But I
Right.
think we also have to be careful that even if there's something that's not true that's put out there, we can't let this be, oh, look at the person who cried wolf, right? Because these incidents
Right.
really do happen. And so we can't just say, well, it wasn't true that time, so that negates all of these other cases out there where we see instances of racism right in our faces. I mean,
Right.
it's still very real, and we need to believe people, believe women,
Yes, that's
men,
right. That's
believe
right.
all kinds of people. Yeah.
That's absolutely right. I wanted to talk about the way you build your characters because, from the kindest lie to People of Means, it's remarkable. And in People of Means, you created portraits of two extraordinary women in two extraordinary times. And what's especially fascinating is that they're mother and daughter. How did how did you feel or how did you want that to complicate and enrich your story, which it most certainly did?
Yeah, in both books. So in The Kindest Lie, I
Yeah,
thought that intergenerational piece. You had
right,
Ruth, my main character, and then her grandmother, the mama character, with very different ideas about things in the world, and that kind of push and pull of mother, grandmother and granddaughter, and then in this one we've got that intergenerational conflict
right,
too between Frida and then decades later her daughter Tulip. And I'm always interested in those expectations of a
right,
family,
right.
and how that can weigh on you, and how a daughter is always looking to quite often please her mother, even if she doesn't
Right.
realize she's trying to please her, and at the same time find her own way
Find
to
her own way.
separate
Exactly.
herself and define who she is for herself. And that's what we see Tulip trying to do, and also trying to understand her mother, because
Right.
there's so much of her mother's life and her past that she doesn't really know, but
That's
she
right.
wants to know and she's yearning to know, but her mother is holding some of that back. And then you think about Frida, whose her parents had certain admonitions for her about how she should comport herself in the world and react to things. And there were things, some of this frustrated Frida. Yet when she has her daughter, she repeats some of the same things
That's
that
right.
frustrated her about her own parents, right? And I think that's what people do when they have children. You say, I'm never going to be like that, but you really
Right.
are your mother, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You are your mom. What do you think about what's going to happen in the future with Tulip if she has a daughter?
I know. Somebody
Isn't that
brought
it?
up
It's
in an
interesting.
interview, they said, Tulip would have a daughter who'd be, a young adult now,
Right.
who would be
Right.
living in the times that we are in right
That's
now.
right. That's
And
right.
so I keep thinking, Tulip, at some point, she was very much on fire for activism and wanting to engage in some of this protest. But then I think even though she did that, she might repeat, just like her mother did, right? If she had a daughter today or son, she might be worried for their future,
That's right.
and
That's right.
also be really frustrated um, that her daughter today has less freedom. I'm thinking about
Isn't
like
that
using her
amazing?
rights and those kinds of things that she wouldn't have access to, that she had.
That's yeah. It's amazing that we have less freedoms today. I wanted to ask about the book is not just about racism; it's also about class. I love that Frida's parents wanted her to be involved in what they call Black excellence, to go to the right school, to not be involved in protests, and to marry the right man. And then, of course, in a wonderful reversal, who does her daughter fall in love with? A
Right.
working class
A
man.
bus driver, right?
No, which is just, I thought, you know what? It shows so much about love and privilege too. I'd love you to talk about this decision that you made for her.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm always interested, just like I did in The Kindest Lie, interested in issues of both race and class and how
Right.
they intersect.
Right. That's
You know
right.
what I mean? Just even the title of the book, People of Means.
I wanted to
You know,
talk about that. Go
yeah,
ahead.
partly we can talk about other meanings of it.
Right.
On its surface, we're talking about, people in a higher socioeconomic bracket. And I grappled a bit with giving the book that title too, because people don't often think of, Black folks as being people of means, but there are plenty of,
Hmm.
Black people who are, who have some, financial privilege. And
That's right.
that was a big deal in the 50s and the 60s, to be able to send a child to Fisk University, such an esteemed institution. That meant a lot, and then we had the Pullman porters there who, that was
Right.
also, when we talk about class, I mean, these were the men who were carrying the bags and shining the shoes of white folks and having to say, yes, sir, no, sir, even though they were being called boy or everyone being
Right.
called George by white passengers, right? So they endured so many indignities, and yeah, they endured all of that. Yet these were the people who were making pretty good money as a Pullman porter. They worked really long hours, but they made money, and they were able to really lift their community into the middle class and send a lot of their children to college. So each generation is trying to make sure that that next generation has more and is able to exceed what they were able to do. And so that these are some of the things that I was dealing with, and I was trying to figure out how to build that tension with
Oh,
the
you definitely did
right.
that. There's
You see that
definitely
with
a,
Tulip and her
yeah.
boyfriend. Yeah, definitely. Because Tulip wants to get involved in the activism, but her boyfriend, Key, who's a bus driver, he's saying, hey, you have the privilege because you're middle class, upper middle class, to be able to engage in that kind of work and it not cost you as much. Whereas he's saying, my mother was a hair netted lunch lady, who finally left that behind to become an entrepreneur. He had a dad who had been incarcerated, so he's like, my family, we're living on the margins. We can't afford to get involved in that kind of thing. We just need to survive out here, make ends meet.
Yeah, because there's a cost of engaging, and there's also a cost in not engaging. But also, the other thing where I love the title, The People of Means, because I kept thinking, it's not just means as in money. It's like what you mean to do in the
In the
world,
world. That's
what you intend. And I absolutely love that. I'm going to stop to tell you some of these great comments and questions we have.
right.
Let me start way up here. Okay. Nisa said, what did you learn from writing book 1 that helped you with book 2? Oh, that's a great question. I love that question.
That is a good question. I think the one thing that my editor, Liz Stein at William Morrow, really pushed me to do in the first book, which I took to the second one, was to be very intentional about character motivation. So she was always asking, why did that character do that? Why does she make that decision? And so she forced me to dig a lot deeper and not just write a story that's very surface level, but to dig deep and to really get into the nuances of who these characters are, making sure every character is multidimensional, that there are no true villains, that everybody has a point.
Right.
So that was really helpful. So those were some of the things that I learned, and not just from my editor, but from some of the other people I workshop with, like Tiare Jones. She was the one who really talked to me about every character having a point of view, and no one is all bad, right? Don't make somebody
Right. No,
bad
right.
that everybody just hates that character. She told me, make sure you show your characters loving each other and being good to each other in the midst of the conflict, because if you see that, then people are going to care about that.
That's right. That's right. No villain believes they are a villain usually. They believe they're
Wow,
doing what they have to be doing.
they are.
And we have another question from Anissa. Do your characters lead you or do you lead them?
Ah, well, it's so funny, Anissa, that you brought that up, because um, I sent an early draft of People of Means to my editor because she wanted to see. It was like the first 50 or 100 pages. So before I had done any editing, it was just the raw first draft, because she wanted to see the direction I was going in. And when she got back to me and she said, "Oh, we need to talk," I knew that she didn't like the direction it was going. And when we got on the call, she asked me, the first thing she said was, "Nancy, tell me about your process." And I said, I let my characters speak to me. And
Okay.
that's how I write. They just continue to speak to me, and I go in whatever direction they lead me. And she said, I'm going to need you to plot, to outline.
Oh,
Right. And
was that hard? Was that
was
hard for
really
you?
hard. That was hard to do because that's not my way.
Right.
But I have a writer friend who sent me an outline that works for her. And so I used that and I wrote a 10-page outline and I sent that to Liz, my editor. And she's like, "Oh, I love it. I'm on board again." And so that's what I did. I had this outline and I followed it somewhat, but then I was able to dream the rest of the way.
Can you send me,
So,
can you like email me the outline?
oh yeah, I can send you that.
I'm always looking for
A good
stuff like
for
that.
outline. Yeah. So really, I think my characters do lead me because the way I'm writing in the first draft is very different from the revision, which is where the real
Right.
reading takes place, because
Right.
I learn so much about the characters as I'm writing them that they tell me, "Oh no, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something different."
Okay. You have another question from Anissa? Was People of Means the original title?
Yes, it was.
It
So
was.
I never had another title. Just People of Means, and
That's
that's
lucky.
the beauty of it. And it's the same thing with The Kindest Lie, which was not my first title, but but it was the first title I think that my publishing team saw. So, and in both cases, they never changed anything. They
That's
just
amazing.
they kept that
That's
coming. I have
amazing.
so many author friends who have to, go to the drawing board and come up with like 15, 20 title ideas.
That's right. That's
Publisher
right.
comes up with some, and everybody's trying to, pick the best one. So I got lucky.
That's really lucky. And we now have one more question from Darlene. Do you have a say in the cover art?
Um, I did have a say. So I was asked by my publishing team to do up like a Pinterest board of some ideas, things that I had for the cover. And this is the cover.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have held up my book. Okay,
So,
yes, the cover is gorgeous. The cover is absolutely
thank you.
gorgeous.
Yeah, so I had some ideas. This was my first foray into historical fiction, and I didn't want it to look like every other book
Right.
of
It
historical
doesn't.
fiction,
It doesn't.
right? And so we also have the more modern period of the 90s. So this woman here, in this more traditional dress represents Frida in the late 50s, early 60s. And then you've got the boombox and the gold hoop earrings,
Right.
which represent the 90s. And I like the way they did the lines there, the separation, and
Yeah, it's
you've
great.
got
And yet
the
they
little
meet in the
precision.
middle. They meet in the
Yes,
middle.
and they meet in the middle. And so I think it was a pretty well done cover. And then also my editor was very clear about wanting brighter colors that would pop, because we kept talking about, so much of it is also about sales. You gotta
I know.
deal
That's
with that.
right.
And so my editor kept saying, we need a cover with colors that will pop in a thumbnail, so that if people are looking digitally,
That's
that they'll see the
smart.
bright colors in the thumbnail image. And so that's something that I wouldn't have even thought of. And also my first book had brighter colors too, and
Right.
in keeping with that same kind of style.
I also like the woman with the hand on. She has her hand on her hip.
And on our
Even though
hip,
she's in the
yeah, so
50s.
these are kind of, a
Like,
little more,
yeah, I love it. I love it. I
urgency
think
and
it's great.
sappiness, and but we were thinking about down to the hairstyle and
Yeah,
all
the
of those
little
things,
flip. Right. Yep.
little
Yep. Yep.
flip. So thinking about the 60s and how women were wearing their hair at the time. So all the details that make such a difference in a
They
cover.
do.
Yeah. And she's got her suitcase. So it's kind of like the suitcase she's carrying when she's coming to Fisk University in Nashville for the first time, suitcase in hand. So yeah, so many things that go into thinking about a cover.
I wanted to ask you about the dual timeline, because my last book was a dual timeline and it drove me certifiably insane.
Yeah,
How did you do it? How difficult was it for you? And would you do it again?
I know. It's so hard with the
It's
dual
really
timeline.
hard.
It really is. And I also kept thinking, because I hadn't done it before, but I was grappling with, is one story more of the primary story, one time period? And in some ways, I think most of the book is the 50s, 60s timeline. And so I think that's kind of the, predominant one, but I don't know if that's the way it's supposed to be done, or if they should, have equal weight or not. But I think it's probably more 60-40, with 60% of the book being that one timeline. But also, I kept trying to make sure that one time period speaks to another, and there's something of a handoff between the 60s and the 90s, and then back and forth, so they don't feel so disconnected. But if certain things are happening in one timeline and there's kind of a through line of some common themes, I'm trying to make sure there's a connection there, so that the reader isn't just jerked out of one time period into the next, but that it makes sense. So that's a lot of the revision work. And moving things around. It really is like putting a puzzle together.
Yep.
That's what it feels like,
Yep. Exactly. So Kirk has commented that some things change. They gave you a rave review, and they said
it was so nice. I was holding my breath. So if people don't know, Kirk is notorious for
nasty.
Yeah, I was going to say just having a very critical eye, but you're more blunt. Yeah.
So those stars mean everything. So they come. One of the things in the rave was that something's changed, but racism stays the same. First, I wanted to ask you: do you feel that that's true? Is it there certainly is still racism, but is it different? And I would ask: do you feel that it's getting worse in this environment now?
Yeah, I don't know if it's, I think because we're in it right now and everything that's happening with where we are right now in the country, and particularly, in the past month or so, I think it feels like it's worse. But, I mean, you think about people who lived in the Jim Crow South, you think about
Right.
slavery, you think about all these other periods where things were bad. What I will say is that I think there's a Coretta Scott King quote, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but she talks about every generation having to regain its
Right.
rights, that we have to keep doing that. And I'm thinking back to the 1860s, so after the Civil
Right.
War, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, 14th Amendment granted birthright citizenship to formerly enslaved people. And then you had the 15th Amendment that gave the franchise the right to vote to Black men. And back then in the 1860s, 70s, you had a lot of Black men holding political office in the South. And then,
Really?
yeah, yep, they did.
Wow.
And then practically a century later in the civil rights movement, when Jim Crow came, they lost all of that and they had to fight to regain everything that they had been granted after the Civil War, right? And then, so we fought to regain that. Then you see where we are today and the rolling back of certain civil rights.
Right.
Where, even though we had a Black president, which, was some progress, there's this retrenchment and we're constantly
Right.
having to fight over and over again. So you never get to a point, at least for me being Black in America, where you can say, oh, I can breathe a sigh of relief. We've made it. We've achieved it. We
Right.
have to keep regaining our rights in every generation.
Let's go back to the question of your writing life. What's your day like? What's your writing day like?
No. Well, I work a full-time job in a demanding full-time job in
You sure
corporate
do. Sure
communication,
do.
right? I remember meeting Dennis, this is just an aside, I met Dennis Lehane, who's one of my writing heroes.
Oh, he's wonderful.
Yeah, I love him, crime fiction writer, Mystic River being one of his, most famous ones. But I did a workshop that he started in Florida, Eckerd College Writers in Paradise. And I remember when I met him, he said, he heard about the kind of job I had. And he said, that's not the kind of job that you need to have. He said he had done some jobs like digging ditches and working in a cemetery and being a limo driver. He said because those were jobs where he didn't have to think a lot, he didn't have to write,
Right.
dedicate all of his mental power and his creativity to writing his novels. And he said that's really what you need, is that kind of a job if you're going to have another job that's not being a novelist. And so I don't have the privilege and luxury to be able to do that. And so I
Yeah.
have a job in corporate communications. So I'm writing all the time. So my day really consists of doing my day job. And then I write in the evenings when I get home or the weekends. A lot of times I'm too tired to write in the evening, unless I'm on a deadline to get a book out. I'm not usually writing after work. I'm usually reserving all day Saturday and all day Sunday to do my writing. And then when I have to go into the office, I have a driving commute. And so sometimes it's close to an hour, getting there, hour and a half coming home. I talk into my my phone,
I love it.
voice memo function, because at first I was thinking, oh, I'll remember that line of dialogue.
No, you never do. You never do, right?
Right? And then I would get to work and I forgot it and I didn't know. And then I'm so frustrated with myself. So that's why I talk into the phone and use that. And then I have an accountability partner out in
Oh,
California.
that's great.
That's nice. So she'll call me and we'll talk for a few minutes about what we're going to accomplish in our 2-hour writing session. We do that. And at the end of that time, I call her back and we discuss what we accomplished. And only once did I lie to her and I said I was going to write, and I set my alarm and went to sleep for that 2 hours. And then called her back and said, oh, yeah, I had a great writing session.
Well, it's probably within your subconscious. I mean, some
Right.
people do that. But that's a great idea to do it. I always email myself stuff because it
That's
takes
smart.
too long to get the pen and paper, and I can't
Right.
read
And
my
what about the
writing.
notes section? I use the notes section on the phone.
Yeah, that's really good too. As long as you're always thinking about it. And also, there are many, many writers who have full-time jobs who do just fine. I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
Most people cannot afford not to have a job.
Right. And
besides
that speaks to
writing.
the class piece.
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm
class
always
piece,
talking
yeah.
about class because I can't remember what author it was, but I remember reading somewhere an author who said that they were suspicious of any novel that doesn't address how those characters make their money.
That's right.
You know?
That's
And
right.
I'm like, that's so true. Like, I care
That's so
about how
true.
people make their money. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
if they're wealthy or poor or in between. I want to know because it matters, right?
It
You
does
know,
matter. It has to do with how you live your life, how you raise your family, if you have a
you
family,
have a
or
family.
how you live, what neighborhood you're in, and
Yep,
how you relate to the world.
that's so
It's
true.
very
It's so
important.
telling.
Very
And so
important.
I always
Yeah.
care
Yep.
that.
Okay. So this here's another. I have two more questions. What's the worst advice anyone ever told you
Oh,
about anything? Actually,
oh God, the worst advice. I can't think of the word. I mean,
or
I
the best
think what
advice?
you said to me triggered the thing about you have to write every day. I think there are some people who, have told me that
You
real
don't. I
writers
don't think
write
I
every day, and that you're not a
have.
real writer if you don't do it. So I think that's bad advice.
Yeah, I don't like it when they
Write when
start with the
you can.
real writer.
Right, right, right.
No.
Because there is no such thing as a real writer. I do think there is a benefit to discipline, and that you can't always choose when you're going to write, when you're feeling like it. I don't believe in the idea that you can only write if the muse visits you. You know
Oh
what I mean?
no.
Because I come from the world of journalism, and so I had to turn a
Right,
story on deadline every day as a television reporter.
right.
One, sometimes two stories a day, and no one cared about a muse. We couldn't have dead air. I had to have a story. You know what I mean? So I had to write whether I felt like it or not. But I don't think it means that you're not a writer if you want to take a break and you don't write every day. So
Yeah,
I think that's nice.
I want to read you some of the comments, and then I have one more question.
Okay.
Michelle Hoover says, Nancy,
Michelle,
Dar,
I love
Dar,
Michelle.
Darlene says, congratulations.
Thank you.
Robin Stull says, hello from
Oh,
Idaho.
hey,
Let's
Robin.
see. Kim Rudder says, hello, book friend.
Yay.
Let's see. Darlene asked that question. And Robin says, I don't know if racism is worse now. It's just so blatantly in our faces. I can't believe these punk Nazis feel free to march on public streets and no one confronts them. White haired women, stand up. Well, I think all people should stand up. All people should stand up. Okay, so my last question is, what beside politics is obsessing you now and why?
Oh, what besides politics? Politics is always obsessing
Yeah,
me.
I know. Me
That,
too.
yeah,
Me too. Me too.
that's the thing. That's what I'm always thinking about. I've been toying with the idea of love stories. I have a love story or multiple love stories in this book. I think, maybe doing something where I think about love and class again. So those are
Yep.
so I'm always thinking about love, and what brings people together, what binds us,
Right.
you know what I mean, and love across differences. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. I don't know if that's what I'll write about next or not.
You
But I'm
never know.
also thinking about different generations of women too. And that's something I've been toying with maybe for another book. More friendship between women who are not of the same age. So again, multi-generational. I'm always interested in that. So that's something I'm interested in exploring. What we learn from each other and how you can be friends with someone who's of a different generation.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I have my happiest friendships. I have one friend who's 20 years old, and I love
Oh, I
her.
love that.
It's so interesting. And
Ooh,
then
you learn from each
and then
other,
I have
right?
yep,
Yeah.
and then I have older and then I have a friend who is in her 90s, which is great. And it depends on the person and the experience, but if you listen, you can have
Yeah.
really great.
You can. I mean, one example was when I lived in West Palm Beach and I was a reporter. I had a neighbor who became a friend, and this was a white woman. So we had that difference. And I was in my 30s, early 30s, and she was in her like 80s, I think, at that
Oh
time.
wow.
Yeah. And so we would get together. We would go walk to the waters, the ocean, go look at it. We would go to breakfast on the weekends, and
So
she was a
nice.
real friend. You know what I mean? Like a genuine friendship with someone who was so different, but yet we still had so much that connected us. Yeah, so I treasure those friendships.
It is something to be treasured. So I want to say a few more things to everybody out there. First, don't forget, go to your indie bookstore and buy People of Means, The Kindest Lie. Buy a lot of books. Look at this gorgeous cover. How can you
I
pass
know,
that
I
by?
know. I don't think I told people where I am. I'm in a hotel room. So people are probably wondering, why is there a bed behind her door?
Oh, so you know what? I thought that, and I thought, well, what if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
weren't? I don't want to offend you
Oh,
and
no,
say
no.
your home looks like
Usually
a
I don't have a
hotel.
bed behind me when I'm doing interviews, but because it's not that kind of show. But I
It has the
I'm in
curtains.
I know. I'm in Tampa because I'm doing a book event this weekend at Oxford Exchange Bookstore with New York
Great,
Times bestselling author Sarah Pinner, Sunday
great.
afternoon. And I was going to leave tomorrow on Saturday, but there's supposed to be a winter storm coming through. So I
Right,
decided to leave a day early to make sure I could get to Tampa. So I'm here in my
right.
hotel room in Tampa.
And you have that lovely art print on the
And I have
wall.
that lovely, right?
At least it's not those ducks flying in the
I
sky.
know,
You can always
right?
tell.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, so everybody, go to your. If you're in Tampa, you want to go see Nancy. If you're anywhere else, you want to go to your independent bookstore. Or I put a link up. It's at the top of the chat chain, so you can just click on that. It'll take you right to Nancy's books. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you
Thank
all so much
you.
for asking questions and posting comments. And most of all, I want to thank Nancy for writing such a beautiful book, for being my friend, and for coming on here. And I'll see everybody next week. And Nancy, you just hang on.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody.